If we had been told how our journey would end, we never would have believed it.
After 88 days traveling through China and living the adventure of our lives, we were expecting a glorious ending with a special episode. Maybe watching the Northern Lights or something like that, but anything would have been better than what we did.
And the thing is, before we even finished uploading all the videos, we just disappeared. That's why today we want to tell you what happened.
Welcome to the epilogue of the trip around China in 88 days, where we'll talk about everything that happened. This trip left us with a lot. The mistakes we made, the things we learned, and how this journey saved our lives. And most importantly, what's next for this channel.
To begin with, we want to give you a bit of context. Before starting this journey, we were living in a small village in rural China known as Yangshuo. We chose that place because we wanted to spend a year studying Chinese, and they offered us an option to maintain our visa. Originally, we planned to stay for a couple of years, but just when we were a month away from renewing our first visa, we were informed that we couldn't stay.
That meant we only had 30 days to move to another city and look for a solution. Fortunately, a friend of ours helped us set up a company in southern China, and even though the time was quite short, we managed to solve the visa problem. And as owners of the company, for the first time in 5 years, we were free to do whatever we wanted, to travel anywhere without answering to anyone, at least for the next 6 months that our visa was valid. And since it was such a small company, the authorities in Shenzhen decided to give us a visa for only 6 months, and we weren't sure if they would renew it for us. So, faced with the uncertainty of whether this would be our last chance to take a long trip, we decided to embark on what we now call the journey around China.
The journey around China.
Welcome to another day traveling around China in 88 days.
At first, traveling was everything. Every kilometer we covered, every city we visited, we were living the dream. And it's really funny because when Max suggested this trip to me, I thought it was crazy, but the real madness would have been not to do it. We visited Muslim, Tibetan, Christian, and Taoist temples. We went to the desert, the mountains, and the tundra. And the magic of this land enchanted us. With every step we took, so much so that we didn't realize the harm we were doing to ourselves. The further we went, the more alone we felt. Fatigue was building up, malnutrition weighed on us, and the frantic pace we had set for ourselves had become a burden that was impossible to bear.
The idea was to upload a video every day, which meant we had to get up very early. Travel to a different city, find something interesting to record, then go back to the hotel, edit all the videos, send them to an editor, and then start all over again.
And figure out what we were going to do the next day.
Eventually, we realized that we were in breathtaking landscapes and dreamlike settings, but in our minds, we just wanted to go back home.
And at that moment, there was nothing more appealing than the idea of watching a movie at home with the cats, eating something homemade.
Popcorn, some popcorn.
Nothing sounded better.
Or just being able to make yourself something to eat, because sleeping in hotels every day means having breakfast in restaurants. And changing cities means you don't know what's around the area, especially in a country like China where the cuisine is so different. All those factors made the homesickness grow, and by mid-December it got much worse because all our friends in Mexico started eating. They started sharing photos at family gatherings, and all we wanted was to spend time with our families again.
So on December 24th, we traveled back to Mexico so we could spend Christmas with our families for the first time in 6 years. The following weeks were a much-needed break, full of laughter and homemade food. Even much of my family came from Spain, and we really allowed ourselves to have a vacation, because filming at this pace is not a vacation.
But like everything, the vacation came to an end. After the December holiday period, our families and friends went back to work, and eventually we realized that we don't belong there, but we didn't belong in China either. As we told you at the beginning of the video, before starting this trip, we had just moved to a new city where we practically didn't know anyone. And as content creators, going back to work is something quite ambiguous. We don't have an office or an established routine, and in this career, no one tells you what to do, how to do it, or where to do it. Therefore, we felt confused, and that confusion turned into procrastination.
After traveling all over China in 88 days and experiencing the difficulties of such a long journey, the idea of keeping on moving no longer motivated us. But wasn't that what we wanted from the beginning?
The whole point is, we started a YouTube channel because we wanted to travel and see other parts of the world, connect with the culture, learn languages, and do all those things we saw other influencers doing. And while we were feeling confused, there were other content creators who kept traveling non-stop, without complaints, without breaks. We couldn't help but wonder what they have that we don't.
I'm not sure what it was, but we didn't have time to find out. Our visa expired in February, so we had to return to China. And as always, saying goodbye in Mexico was hard, but even harder was arriving in a city we didn't know without knowing what to do.
And then the effects of stress started to show. As soon as we arrived in China, I started to feel really bloated and had terrible indigestion. I felt very tired, I felt exhausted, and eventually we had to go to the hospital. While we were there, we got a reality check. The truth is, throughout the whole trip, we had completely neglected our bodies. The last few months had been a mix of fast food, sleepless nights, and no exercise at all. The only thing we cared about was sticking to our filming schedule, but in the process, we had forgotten about ourselves. And when they sent me to get an endoscopy, we realized that something had to change.
How do you feel?
I'm at 100%. I didn't talk to the doctors, it's kind of like a production line. I went in, they put the mouthpiece on me, and the next thing I knew, I was talking to you on camera. Do I look 100%? You look 100%. Well, I already have the results of the endoscopy, so let me give you a brief summary of what I have. About 10 years ago, I started to feel a kind of burning sensation in the pit of my stomach. I thought it was heartburn, acid reflux, something related to the fact that I ate a lot of chili and didn't have the best diet. But the burning didn't go away. Instead, it kept getting worse. So I went to the doctor for the first time about a year later, and they ordered a series of tests. Among them were an endoscopy and a colonoscopy. These were pretty expensive tests, and the doctor told me I was too young to have this kind of problem. So he said that if I didn't want to do them, I could start taking antacids and proton pump inhibitors and change my eating habits to see if there was any improvement. I took the treatment for about a month, and as soon as my symptoms went away, I went back to my usual habits, and eventually the discomfort came back. And that's how I lived for 10 years. It's incredible to think it was 10 years. 10 years trying all kinds of pills, all kinds of antacids, and every time I found something that worked for me, I kept using it until it stopped working, and then I would switch to another medication. And it wasn't until I moved to China in 2019 that the symptoms got so bad I had to go to the doctor. During that visit, they ordered the same tests. That's when I had my first endoscopy and colonoscopy. Fortunately, the colonoscopy came out fine, but during the endoscopy they found a small polyp that was less than half a centimeter at the time, and the doctor told me it looked fine, it looked benign, and it seemed more like the result of an injury than something bad. So he recommended that I either have it removed or change my eating habits, and that I come back in 2 or 3 years for another endoscopy to make sure everything was okay. But as you can probably imagine, I didn't change my eating habits and I didn't go back for a checkup in 2 or 3 years. It's been 4 years since then, and the symptoms have never been worse. The thing is, throughout the trip we were so distracted by what we were doing and so busy traveling that there was no time to stop and think. But it was always in the back of my mind. I always knew something wasn't right during that time if I didn't get the tests done. It was mostly fear that something might have changed, but there was no other option. Now that we were back in China and no longer traveling, I went to the doctor and the results of the endoscopy confirmed my fears. After 4 years, my polyp went from measuring less than half a centimeter to 1.6 centimeters. Here it says so, which is already starting to be a bit concerning. Therefore, they sent me to get 2 biopsies because besides the polyp, there were a series of bumps. Red ones on the upper part of the stomach, and for the next 6 days, honestly, I couldn't sleep at all. Because when you hear the word biopsy, you can't help but think the worst and start searching for symptoms and everything else on Google. And you work yourself into a spiral that had me shaking, but fortunately today I received the biopsy results and everything is fine. The polyp is benign and the bumps are just a simple irritation, but I do have chronic gastritis. It's the result of not taking care of myself and having medicated myself for so many years, but well, now that we have the results, there's finally a path to recovery. Next week I have to be admitted to have the polyp removed, and even though it's a minor procedure, it's a requirement in China. So I'll have to spend a couple of nights in the hospital, but at least now I can do it with the peace of mind that everything is going to be fine. And the doctor warned me that just because everything is fine today, no. It doesn't mean it will always be that way. And if I don't change my lifestyle habits, it could eventually turn into bigger problems, especially since I have a family history of colon cancer. So, before I continue with the story, I want to emphasize that it's extremely important not to self-medicate and to see a doctor as soon as symptoms appear. Because one thing became clear to me, I was lucky, since if it had been a malignant polyp 4 years ago, they still could have done something. But today could have been different. Honestly, I don't know how I let so much time go by, and most likely if it hadn't been for this trip, I would have postponed it for another whole year. And then who knows how things would have turned out. Actually, the only thing the trip had done was expose our terrible habits, and now that we know, we have a chance to redeem ourselves.
From that moment on, we signed up for the gym, decided we were going to make almost all our meals at home, cooked by us with healthy foods, because things couldn't go on like this. Little by little, we started feeling a bit better, and eventually the inspiration came back.
Ideas have been coming from everywhere. We feel inspired again and very motivated to keep going with what's next. And when we looked back at our 88-day adventure, we realized that we still have a lot left to discover. Many times we were in a place and wanted to keep exploring and dive deeper into the local culture, but because we set a time limit for ourselves, we forced ourselves to film quickly and rush out. But this time, we want to do something different.
This time, we want to take a trip with more purpose. We want to explore the unknown parts of China and combine it with the best and most advanced technology. This time, the idea is to travel around China in electric vehicles, without rushing, without pressure, and exploring every corner in depth.
This time we want to go deeper into what you liked most about the previous series, and a lot of that had to do with technology. The product expos, electric cars, electric motorcycles, and all those things that are emerging in this country in one way or another. And the good thing is that we live in the right city to do it, because nowadays Shenzhen is the cradle of modern technology, and I'm sure that over the next few decades this place will have a lot to offer. And we're going to start with a trip that we'll tell you about later. For now, this is the end of the 88-day series, but the beginning of a new adventure, and here's the first episode in case you haven't seen it.
They have cool stuff.
Yeah, cool.